So first off, I'm going to call the meeting to order. Welcome, everyone. My name is Regina Neville, and I'm the chair of the board for Intermediate District 287. This is our general board meeting for Thursday, June 25th, 2020. This meeting is being live streamed on the District 287 YouTube channel. The meeting is also being recorded, and the link will be posted on the 287 website in the school board section. The public, as always, is invited to share comments with the board. If you would like to do so, please complete the virtual meeting request form for written input. This form is available on the 287 website in the school board section. Written comments must be received by 4:30 p.m. on the day of a board meeting, and they will be read at the beginning of the meeting. And just a reminder that since this is a virtual meeting, we will be taking a roll call vote for each action item that'll be led by our clerk, Crystal Brecky. The next thing up is to read the mission for 287. And I know Heather Douglas was planning to do this. Heather, I haven't seen you log on, but are you here? I'm not sure Heather has had the opportunity to log on yet. So I'm going to read the mission for this evening. The mission of Intermediate District 287 is to be the premier provider of innovative specialized services to ensure that each member district can meet the unique learning needs of its students. And now we'll have board member introductions. Crystal, could you please call out each of our names and we'll introduce ourselves and the district we represent.
Absolutely. We'll start with Steve Adams.
Thanks, Crystal. Steve Adams, representing Hopkins, District 270.
And I am Crystal Brackey from Richfield Public Schools, and we'll move next to Casey.
Hi, everyone. Ann Casey, representing St. Louis Park.
I'm doing some, but I'll call y'all right back.
We're gonna switch. This computer keeps breaking in and out.
Okay, maybe Lonnie. Oh, no, it's gonna.
That sounds good. We're gonna move on to Keen.
I think you're
And
muted.
you're on, Andrea.
Oh my gosh, I've been on Zoom all day. You'd think I have it by now.
I get it.
Hi, I'm Andrea Keen from Wayzata. Nice to see everyone.
I'm looking to see if Ruthie has rejoined us. Ruthie, are you here? I don't see the name.
She was on briefly.
Okay, we'll come back at the end if she has rejoined us. Same for Heather. We'll move on to, Michelle Kunz just left the meeting. So Marty.
I'm back.
Hi, I'm Heidi Marty, representing Mound West Tonka Schools.
Thanks, Heidi. Michelle, we'll come back to you.
Okay. Michelle Kuhn, representing Orono.
Neville.
Hi, I'm Regina Neville, representing Edina.
I do not. Sam, you are there. Sorry.
Yes, Sam Sant, Robbinsville 281.
And Seidel.
Adam Seidel, Eden Prairie 272.
And I see Ruthie is with us, so we're going to come back to Ruthie for the final introduction.
Hi, this is Ruthie Dowlers from Brooklyn Center Community Schools, number 286.
Good, thank you. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to introduce staff members who have joined us. And I'm going to introduce, hopefully I will get this correct, but our new leaders. First, I want to welcome our new leaders who are here this evening. Tanya Allen, Melissa Bratting, Radius Guess, Marissa Nathan, and also some returning leaders with us this evening, Janie Tiedemann, Antoine Williams. Welcome to Chris Martin. Special welcome to Lonnie, Lonnie Shaw, who's going to be reading his poetry with us shortly. Additional staff with us this evening, Michelle Axel, May Hawkins, Kim Helgeson, Rachel Hicks, Theon Jarrett, Sandy Lewandowski, Ben McGrath, Chad Maxa, Elizabeth Lodge Rogers, Julie Turilla, John Voss, Gloria Wilder, and Michelle Wolf. Have I accidentally missed any of our staff members who are with us this evening? Welcome, everyone. Before we get to the most fun part of the meeting, which is always share the success, I'm going to walk us through the agenda. Our consent agenda, I just want to point out that there was an addition, an item number 7 that was added today. We received the contract from Ewald Consulting with Government Relations, which is our contract for our lobbying company. So this is an opportunity to approve this as part of the consent agenda. Our Share the Success, we have with us Chris Martin from the South Education Center and our poet Lonnie Shaw. We will also be introducing our new district leaders. Our Superintendents Report will include a review of the principal compensation study, an update on the task force for the 2020-2021 school opening model, the student safety coach model update, and 287 anti-racist leadership program introduction. We'll have a business report this evening, which will include our 2020-2021 budget presentation and a human resources report. We will have a second read in board business of some board policy, and followed by our basic concluding chair reports. Are there any additions to the agenda?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
if you said it, I missed it. There is community input as well.
Thank you. I did not say that in the walk through the agenda. We do have hearings, opportunity from the audience to speak. So that will be a part of this evening's agenda. Thank you. And Juanine, I see a message from Heather Douglas. She's working on joining the meeting, and there seems to be some technical difficulty with that. And I'm not sure if you're the right person to ask, but I know you will know who the right person is. So thank you so much. Are there any additions to the agenda? Hearing none, I move that we accept the agenda as presented. Is there a second?
Second, Adams.
Seconded by Steve Adams. Crystal, would you please call the roll?
Adams.
Aye.
Brackey is an aye. Casey.
Aye.
Keen.
Yes.
Dallas.
Yes.
Coons.
Aye.
Marty.
Aye.
Neville.
Yes.
Sam.
Yes.
Seidel.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The agenda is approved. And we do have an email that was presented to the board to be shared this evening. It's accompanied by a video. And I'm not sure which we're going to be having first. I'm just going to share who the video and the email are from the same group. It's from SEIU Local 284. This is our Intermediate District 287 support staff, and this is drafted by Patty McKay. So we're grateful to have the email and the accompanying video. Juanine, which should we be sharing first this evening?
I believe we're going to do the video first.
Thank you. So we'll be, just stay tuned, and whenever we're ready, we'll watch the video that's been submitted to share with the board. Thank you for sharing that. And I know there's some music that accompanies the video, but I'm glad that we were able to see all of the subtitles and see all of the images that were shared. I'd like to invite Ben McGrath to read the email that was submitted to the board.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will be reading the statement as written and provided to me earlier today. Good evening, members of Intermediate District 287 School Board and Superintendent Lewandowski. We am grateful for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the SEIU Local 284 members who work as dedicated employees of our district in the role of school support staff. As employees of Intermediate District 287, we work as administrative support, as maintenance specialists, and as cooks and many other roles in supporting the mission of our district. During the pandemic, we have continued to support the mission of the district, many of us in the role of essential employees who have continued to work on site at the various district buildings. We have prepared a brief video that shares visually some of the work that continues to support the students that we serve. As you may be aware, contract negotiations for the upcoming term with the district have stalled. For the time being, in a long time, we were not able to reach a contract settlement with the district before the end of the term of the current contract. These times demand that our attention be spread across many facets in both our professional and personal life. It is among this uncertainty, voices are asking to be heard with a renewed depth and perspective. That will be the defining feature of this moment we find ourselves in. With an unprecedented pandemic changing how we perform our role and society changing how we think about our role, the critical support infrastructure at 287 proudly operates reliably and dependably while upholding our district's strategic priorities. Being in a supporting role, it can be beneficial and become all too easy to operate silently while providing the skeletal framework. But under these extraordinary circumstances, we are asking for our full value to be heard. Working in a para-COVID environment has required an adaptability every 284 member is willing and well-suited to exhibit in order to uphold the district throughout this crisis. Food services took on several responsibilities new to them to remain contributors to our district after breakfast and lunch programs had been canceled. 284 employees have displayed essential bravery in the face of unfamiliar dangers to both themselves and their families. Facilities educated themselves on the proper methods to provide safe workspaces for other staff, while little was understood about the nature of this pandemic. 284 staff has demonstrated their dedication to maintaining our district mission. Administrative support organized and distributed technological and nutritional home bundles for our students while they adjusted to distance learning. We are thankful to be able to do what we do for the district and our students. We were thankful before COVID, and we are thankful during COVID. We will be proud of the work we do after COVID. Extraordinary times are met by extraordinary people. That is the brief call to the attention we are asking in this moment, so we can continue to support the calls of attention made by our students and others within our society. This is not about capitalizing upon a moment. This is about rising to the call of that moment and the recognition of the value that comes with it. We know that you understand what capitalized it is we do in our roles for 287. We are encouraging you to further consider how capitalized it is that we do our roles for 287. Finally, we ask the School Board of Intermediate District 287 to give your negotiators the authority to settle a fair and equitable contract that reflects the value of what our members contribute to our district and that is equitable with other district contract settlements. Thank you.
Ben, thank you for reading the email, and thank you to Ms. McKay and the members of SEIU Local 284. We appreciate your feedback and the video. We're going to move on to approval of the consent agenda. Are there any items that anyone would like removed from the consent agenda for separate consideration? Hearing none, is there a motion to accept the consent agenda as printed?
So moved.
Moved by Sam.
Seconded, Andrea.
Seconded by Andrea Keene. Crystal, would you please call the roll?
Adams,
Aye.
Brackey is an aye. Casey,
Aye.
Keen,
Yes.
Dallas, Ruthie, it looks like you're on mute.
Yeah.
Oh, we can hear you now.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm going to say Douglas in case the 612 number is Heather calling from her phone. Okay, it doesn't seem like it is. Coons.
Aye.
Aye.
There she is.
Oh, I think that Heather,
Yeah. I don't know exactly. I've never done this by phone. My computer's not working correctly.
Okay, we were just, this was the roll call to approve the consent agenda.
Yes, aye.
Thank you. I think we got Coons and we're on Marty.
Yes.
Thank you. Neville,
yes.
Sant,
Yes.
Seidel.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries. Next, we move on to share the success. And I'm so pleased to welcome Chris Martin from the South Education Center and Lonnie Shaw. And Lonnie, I believe, have you been able to rejoin us?
Yes.
I'm so glad that you are here. I've had the opportunity to listen to you share your poetry more than once, and it is an honor to have you at our school board meeting. I'm going to invite Mr. Martin to give some brief introductions and share a little background.
Okay.
Thank you very much. My name is Chris Martin, right here. I am the executive director of Unrestricted Interest, an organization dedicated to helping neurodivergent learners transform their lives through writing. And we have had many partnerships throughout our existence, but none as dynamic, progressive, and really successful as the one we've had with SEC. And the success is just built every year. One of the things that we really appreciate is the opportunity to do longitudinal work and see how programming can grow when we get to work with students for multiple years. Lonnie is the best possible example of that. These are Lonnie's first two chapbooks. And the third one will be designed and printed this summer. And Lonnie's chapbooks have been presented by award-winning poets at places like Moon Palace, have been taught in college curriculum by poets at Augsburg College, the New School in New York, Carleton College. So Lonnie has created a following. And I will say this, that this might have been my first opportunity to see Lonnie since the beginning of the uprising. And I write a newsletter about the work we do. And I knew right when the uprising began that the first voice I was going to share was going to be Lonnie's. And that I felt so grateful, Lonnie, that you had created the work this year at SEC that would fit the moment and would make sure people heard from a poet who needed most to be heard. So thank you. And I would love to hear you now. You read some poems, Lonnie?
Well, you know this is not last year, right? I mean, I'll be graduating next year.
Right.
So.
I know.
What's the title? Read the title first.
Ode to the face that I'm a black boy. Ode to every black boy and to living and dead, but especially the living. Ode to the black boys once into college and playing football and beginning who they are, and not telling late letting people get to know them in every race. Oh boy, where are we?
Right there. Oh, to the black boy.
All to the black boys who doesn't stop, and stay proud. All to the black boys who see other black boys getting shot and getting abandoned. We are not right there.
Yeah, you are. You just finished the sentence before.
All to the black boys, the boys that cross the carrot who survive everything. All to the black boys that who get really angry and think no one cares. And find someone that to support them. All to the black boys who tell their own story. All to the black boys that can still do it and who are smart, who are artistic. I just can't. All to the black boys who can tell their own story. Okay, got that. All to the black boys who are artistic. I see them. I am proud of us, and we will go find somebody who to love us. That's my first one. Second one, cause they break me down. When they lost a parent and this they take care of you, they break you down. They hear someone that to control you before the color of your skin. They break you down. They lost your rights and your voice. When they break you down. I made that too big.
Yeah. 1 second. We're having some technical difficulties. You go here. You zoom out. Right there, you said you lose your rights in your voice when they break you down.
And when they try to prove if you try to prove them wrong, they will only look at your past. You're weak and you're depressed, you're tired, you're stressed. You live in the hands of the state and live in the state of hell. What does your guardian you from the truth? What does the state do? Nothing. They do. What is it?
They dodge everything.
They die everything. The truth, the question of my history, all their ways to change. And what if they black and the?
What if you're black?
If he was black, you have a disability that they break you down. I know many people have disabilities that they smart and have some inside there, but they do not have a voice. But they do have a voice, but they do not let them break you down. That's it.
Wow, thank you so much.
Thank you. Don't leave.
Yeah, just a second.
Thank you, Lonnie.
All right, perfect.
Bye.
Hang up. Scott.
Oh, Regina, I think you're muted.
I am muted. Thank you. And unfortunately, that may not be the last time I'm muted. Chris, is there anything that you would like to share to close out? I'm sorry we didn't get a chance to share with Lonnie what a fabulous job he does.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot in the wake of the murder of George Floyd is Lonnie's question in this poem. And what if you're Black and have a disability, right? That that these issues cannot be separated, that the intersectionality of race and disability is a crucial field in which we need to answer difficult questions and become our best neighbors, our best selves, our best purveyors of mutual care. So, Lonnie, that question has been ringing in my head.
It's well stated. Are there any questions or comments for Chris Martin?
Chris, this is Sandy. Thanks for coming in tonight, and we'll try to convey our thanks to Lonnie in an email or a call. He is a brilliant writer. I have the privilege of being on a committee with Justice Ann McKeague. She's one of the justices on the Minnesota Supreme Court. And the committee she's running is between a number of attorneys from DHS and the child protection system. And the goal of the committee is how to improve the lives of kids who are in our various systems. And I shared the poem with her, and she immediately wanted to bring those poems to the committee. So there'll be another opportunity for individuals who are in positions to care for each other, as you so wonderfully said. And I hope that Lonnie gets all the recognition he can possibly get for those brilliant poems. So thank you.
Absolutely. And it's one of the things that we care deeply about with unrestricted interest is the way in which we never have to pick whether a poem is written for artistic value or for advocacy potential, because as you can see in Lonnie's poems, it's both at the same time. And so it's amazing to have these students creating work that allows them to express themselves and to get the attention that they deserve. But it also has this second life, this other life where it goes out into the world and can change people's minds about expression and disability more widely.
Michelle, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say how moved I am by Lonnie's poems, and I'd read them before. In fact, I have a copy of each of the books.
Okay.
Poems. So in other times, I might have caught him and said, "Would you sign my book for me, please?" Right. But we are where we are. But one sentence that struck me in the second poem. I know so many people with disabilities that are smart and have something inside. I mean, that just blows me away, because that is so many of these kids' reality. People don't believe that they have anything inside.
Mm-hmm.
So, or are not smart because they have a disability. So anyway, I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much for all the work you do, Chris. That's amazing. Absolutely. And thanks to Lonnie again.
Yeah, and I would a kind of inside peek into our process together is often we will begin in conversation, and then Lonnie might say something. And in this case, with They Break You Down, it was They Break You Down. And he said it a couple times, kind of venting about some frustrations he was having. And I said, I feel like that, the way you said, you repeated that a couple times in this conversation, I feel like that's an anchor to a poem we could write. So maybe we could just kind of start going. And, even though Lonnie has some, finds challenges in reading his work aloud, it's actually created very seamlessly. And so Lonnie just gives you this entire poem in one run, and I'll talk to him about little pieces where it feels like, oh, what if we did this here? Or, can you give me a little bit more about this, or a little bit more specificity? But otherwise, it's an incredible degree of fluency. And so that gap between presentation and potential, I think, is where these kind of poems really slip into and make people think a little harder and deeper.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Well, thank you again, Chris, and please do extend our appreciation to Lonnie. This is an honor to have both of you here. This is the best part of our board meeting when we get to share the success, and I've really missed it as we began with our virtual format. It fits right in. So thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much. I gotta go start putting kids to bed, but it's great
Okay.
to see all of you.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Bye.
Well, Superintendent Lewandowski, if I could invite you to introduce and welcome our new staff leaders. And maybe before we move into that, just want to express a sincere welcome on behalf of the board to all of you this evening. We have so much admiration for what you do, for the leadership you provide, and for all of the amazing programming that is reaching our students. So we're grateful for your work and welcome you to 287. So Superintendent Lewandowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I join you in welcoming all these leaders to either the district or to a new position within the district. This is really a pretty remarkable moment for those of us that are often involved in summer hiring. I think this is a new early date for having all of our administrative positions filled, except the one that Antoine just exited, so that we'll have to do some backfilling there. But we're very grateful to all these individuals. They have a heart for District 287, and I'm actually going to let them introduce themselves, and we'll start with Tanya.
Hello, everyone. I am Tanya Allen, and some of you already know me from my previous role. I had to adapt the questions slightly. So I'm currently the North Education Center principal, and I will be moving into the Director of School and Community Engagement role. I'm really looking forward to that. And really, instead of what brings me here, what keeps me here is just really the passion of all the individuals that I get the pleasure to work with. I've had the opportunity to work with so many different people throughout the district, and that's what keeps me here and keeps me going. As far as a tidbit to share, this has been an interesting week for me. I'm not a normal person to do lots of high profile type things. I've had a couple of interviews, but I was on NPR with Angela Davis earlier this week talking about coronavirus summer slides. So it was really fun. It's not something I've ever done before. And it was a really fun experience for me. So that's an interesting tidbit.
Thank you, Tanya. That was perfect. Thanks for leading us off. And Melissa, please.
Sure. Well, good evening, everyone. It's great to be here. My name is Melissa Broading, and I am the new Director of Student Support and Itinerant Services. I have been with this organization for about 10 years now. My career began as a teacher of the blind, visually impaired with our itinerant programs, then moved to an administrative intern role, an assistant director role, and now I'll be serving as a director. And much like Tanya, as I thought about the question of what brought me here, I think about what keeps me here. And I just truly appreciate and am honored to work with so many of the talented educators that we have here in 287 and then in all of your districts. Within my role, I've had the opportunity to partner with many of the teachers in your communities, your coordinators and directors, to collaboratively work to meet the needs of our students. And it's just been an honor, and I really feel really thankful to be in this role, and I look forward to continuing to work alongside all of you as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. And Radius, please.
Hello, everyone. I am Radius Guest, and my new position is that I am the Director of Equity and Inclusion. I last worked for the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board, where I was the Community Outreach, Equity and Inclusion Manager. What brought me to this district? I just have to tell you that I just spent so much time on your website, and I liked what I saw. I saw a school district that appeared to be as committed to advancing educational excellence and equity as I was, or as I am. And I wanted to work for a school district that was as committed to focusing on making decisions that would be in the best interest of young people, of students that are representing various diverse racial equity backgrounds, racial ethnic backgrounds. So I really enjoyed the last question, which was, what's an interesting tidbit about you? So I'm always embarrassed to answer this question, but it is a fun question to answer. And so I'm a former Olympic hopeful, qualified for the Olympics, but as you may recall, President Carter, we boycotted the Olympics because Russia invaded Afghanistan. So we were not able to go to the Olympics, but that would have been my year. I have represented the United States in international track and field competition, have broken a couple of world records, and I currently am diversity and leadership chair for the U.S. Olympic Committee USA Track and Field. So that's, I'm always embarrassed to answer that question, but at the same time, it's such an amazing question to be able to answer. So thank you. I'm really looking forward to working with all of you and meeting all of you.
Thank you, Radius. Thank you. I appreciate that. And that tidbit is probably unique tonight, I bet. So thank you so much. Antoine.
How's everyone doing? My name is Antoine Williams. My new position is the interim principal at North Education Center. Before I go on, I'll just introduce my wonderful family because they are here with me. And I realized I didn't. My son Gabriel, our son, my daughter Mary, and my wife LaTwana. So it's my wonderful family. I was serving as the assistant principal in the ALC and our high school with students, serving students with ASD as well. And what brought me here? So when I first started, I was at not Fridley. I'm walking back, babe. Take me there. So when I first started, I was at North St. Paul. So I started as a paraprofessional. I went on from there to get my special education license in EBD, teaching in EBD, and I started my teaching career in the Federal Center for program in St. Paul. After that, I went on to Fridley to do some dean work, and it didn't fulfill what I wanted. I always found that working and with students and the special ed population was really fulfilling to me. So I was able to find something at North Education Center in Intermediate District 287, and I was very fortunate to be able to serve as the assistant principal there. What keeps me here is the wonderful people that I work with. I've been very fortunate, and I tell Ms. Tanya this all the time. I've been very fortunate to have Ms. Tanya as a leader. She has really coached me and pushed me to be a better person. And the students, I really love working with the students. And one interesting thing about me, I don't know if I can talk about Olympics, so that's amazing. But my wife reminded me that when I first finished my college career, I thought I wanted to be occupational therapist. I thought I was gonna serve in health. And it's funny how, serving students with special needs, it's like a calling. And when I found that job in District 622, it was really something that I enjoyed. So that's one special tidbit about me is I actually have my degree in kinesiology, exercise science, and I thought I was gonna be an occupational therapist, and here I am today. Thank you.
Thank you, Antoine. And I just learned some new things about you. I didn't know that. You're right. And thanks for introducing us to your wonderful family as well. Appreciate knowing them. And Marissa.
Hi, everybody. My name is Marissa Nathan. I'm just so excited to be here and to meet all of you tonight. So thanks for giving us the opportunity to come and do so. So I am the new professional development manager for District 287. I was formerly an independent educational consultant, working with linguistically and culturally diverse students and staff members. And I did this work nationally as well as internationally in public and private schools. And so I've worked in many different systems, which I thought wouldn't be a good fit for the professional development manager position. What brought me to the district is, this is also one of my tidbits, that I'm relocating back to the Twin Cities area from Milwaukee. I've been living there for the last 11 years, but formerly a Minneapolis resident, moved there, I came back. And so moving back, I was looking for different positions and I saw this one and did some research, much like Radius did on your website, and noticed what your mission and vision was, and heard wonderful things about the innovative work that's happening in District 287. In conjunction with this, I'm also starting my admin license through Mankato State with the Equity and Leadership Program. And so it seemed like the two would fit really well together. So I was so excited when the job worked out. And so I'm just looking forward to moving forward and getting started. So with that relocation, there's one thing I'll point out. I'm a Packer fan. I will continue to be a Packer fan. And so I left Minnesota the first time a Vikings fan, but the Packers did win me over. So I'm going to continue with being a Packer fan as we get the football season started. So there you go.
Well, thanks for acknowledging the true fan base that you are going to stay in. Appreciate that. And thank you all for coming, not just tonight, but coming to our district. We have lots of work to do, and I truly believe it's the right work for this moment. We're excited to have you join us, and I look forward to working with each and every one of you. I'll just open it up if board members have any comments or questions.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? I don't see any raised hands. Oh, Michelle, thank you.
Well, I just wanted to say thank you so much for coming out on this lovely evening. I hope your commute wasn't too long. But I really miss our get on the bus days. So I hope that soon we will be able to get on the bus and meet you in person under different circumstances. And just for Tanya, I heard you on NPR. I was so excited. I know somebody. You did a wonderful job. So thank you.
Additional questions or comments?
Ruthie Dallas, I just want to say thank you. I'm looking forward to meeting you in person sometime soon, I hope. And I think I've met you, Radius, at some of your powerful parenting meetings in Maple Grove, right? Also your school district?
That is right. That's where you're, that's right. Now I know where I've seen you.
Yeah,
I used to do a lot of work with the Osceola schools.
Yes, yes. It was quite some sessions you were putting on.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks everybody for being here. Yeah.
Additional questions or comments? Well, thank you all. This is it is really an honor to have you join our district and to work with our students. And Michelle stated what's been on my mind. I cannot wait for another Get on the Bus so that we can just share all of the work that you do in person. So thank you all very much. Sandy, any closing comments or?
No, that did it. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you all very much. We're going to move on to our superintendent's report. And the first item, 6.1, is the review of the principal compensation study. I know that this was introduced to the board last fall, so we've had, it's not background that everyone has necessarily had, so nice to have the opportunity to see this come back again with a little bit of additional data. Sandy, could I ask, maybe you could give a couple of introductory remarks?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that. Yes, board members, this is the first time we've undertaken a really extensive study of compensation. And this has been going on now for several months, as Regina mentioned. We first brought it up in December in relationship to our principal compensation. and then advanced it to actually getting the contract with Gallagher. And they have just delivered their preliminary report to us. And because it confirmed our conversation on principal compensation that we had in December, we wanted to just share some of that preliminary information with you. It validates the decision to raise the compensation of our principals. And the board actually approved that in an earlier meeting when you passed the contract for admin unaffiliated employees. But tonight, Michelle's going to give you a few more details as information. So Michelle Axel, please.
Thank you, Sandy. Thank you, board chair. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
I often have technical difficulty with my volume, and my cookie jar is overflowing. It's just wonderful, great way to start a June board meeting. Thank you, Sandy. She shared a lot of what was covered on the memo, and I'd like to provide just a little bit more information, as we had one board member ask about the principal salaries and about the preliminary report earlier today. And I'd like to share some information that we provided, as I found it was helpful not only to share that information with that board member, but would be helpful for you all to know as well. So you are aware, surveys were distributed to our 11 member districts and our 3 other intermediates, as well as 2 of the counties. The preliminary report, in terms of for our principals, did confirm that the district's actual average salary for the principal benchmark position is currently below the market median by 10.4%. So this increase that is in the July 1 principal increase that's going to be included in the 2021 original budget, which May and Gloria will ask for approval of under the financial report tonight. Based on this increase, the district's actual then average salary for that principal benchmark position after the July 1 increase will place the position still below the market median, but by 5.9%. So currently, the principal benchmark position is 10.4% below the market median. With the July 1 increase, it will move that position to be below the market median by 5.9%. The impact, the dollar impact increase to and on the 2021 budget is $20,000. I'm going to stop there. I'll let Sandy, if you want to add anything more.
Thank you, Michelle. As I said earlier, we wanted to bring you this as information just to begin to close that loop from our December conversation. Without a doubt, you will hear more about this compensation study as it gets finalized, and we'll be talking about that in future board meetings. We really do appreciate the board supporting our principal compensation. I can tell you right after hiring season, it's pretty brutal out there. You have to stay very competitive. And in addition, we are a unique district. And so oftentimes our candidate pool is smaller than a K-12 regular education candidate pool might be for principals. We feel we have really got excellent principals on board right now. And this compensation study validated the decisions and the direction that we're going with that compensation. But we'll stop and see if there's any questions.
Thank you. I see Sam raising his hand, and I can also remind everyone too, if the raise hand function, it should be available on Board Book Premier as well. But Sam, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Chair Neville. What is the median market salary for a principal right now?
I think she's going to
Give
look it
me
up.
one moment and I will look it up. I have the information based on an hourly rate, and that hourly rate for the median market value is $70.30.
And then the cost to bring it up. So currently our district is at 10.1% below that, and the adjustment would reduce that gap to 5.9%. The cost of 20,000. What does that cost mean? What represents that additional cost? I guess is that for total principals to bring up their medium salaries then, or is that per principal?
It's an overall is that it would really bring up each equally at about 3%, an additional 3% to their salaries, their current rate.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions?
Any additional questions or comments?
Ruthie?
I can't find my raise hand button. I'm not sure.
Oh, thanks, but go ahead.
I was just wondering, Michelle, what is the plan to actually, when are you projecting that you'll be able to bring the salaries up to your typical, I think you said the average paid for principals?
I'm not sure I understand your question. I apologize.
Well, you
Would you
said
ask?
the amount that you're looking at is 5.9 below the median or whatever for principals. When are you projecting that it will actually, the position will actually be up to the average principal salary? Does that
So
make
your question makes sense. And as we're sharing, we are just starting to receive the preliminary results from the study. And these were the first group of preliminary results that have come forward. And so as just that initial, my understanding is by bringing them up, even though the salary is still going to be below the market median, it's still considered competitive. And then we're going to, once we continue to work with Gallagher, once the full report is there, then that's the deep dive and that conversation around their recommendations in terms of what does that look like in terms of projections and discussions around increases. So it's really too early for me to talk knowledgeably in that area. And I look forward to Gallagher coming forward and being here in front of the board and helping us to unpack the full results and allow us to understand further what the recommendations would be around not only if this impacts principals, but and if other positions.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Any additional questions or comments? All right, thank you so much for the update. We really appreciate the fact that we're able to gather additional data. It's really going to help us make some informed decisions So we'll look forward to the rest of that data as it becomes available. Thanks for your work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Okay, we will move on to 6.2, which is an update on Task Force 2020-2021 school opening model.
Yeah, thank
I
you.
know that there are no easy answers here.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As all of your districts are doing the same research and study on how to prepare for all three options as MDE has directed us to do, we also are doing that. And so we wanted to just give you a brief overview of the process. I want to recognize Chad because he is leading that process, but he also has led our incident command group. And for those of you that are not familiar with that, as soon as the governor indicated that schools were closing in March, we went into our system of incident command, which gives you a template and a format and a structure to basically deal with a crisis. It worked really well, and part of why it worked really well was Chad's leadership. I'm really grateful for him taking that on, and part of that is also figuring out what we're going to do going into the next school year. So thank you. Chad, go ahead.
Thank you, Sandy. Good evening, Madam Chair and Board Directors. It's good to see you all virtually. Glad to be here. I'm not going to go through this memo bullet by bullet. I will trust that you've taken a look at it, but I do have some highlights and some things that I wanted to cover with you all. And I wanted to begin by thanking all of the leaders in our district that are participating on Incident Command, and that includes our principals. This is one of the largest collaborative efforts and planning efforts that I've ever participated in. And as many of you have probably heard, the Department of Education is not going to be providing any direction for fall until late July. So we've got some time to rest in ambiguity. Last week they did release, the Department of Education and MDH released probably 500 to 600 pages of guidelines for us to incorporate into our planning process. So we're obviously in the process of sifting through that and finding out where the work that we've done prior to that guidance coming out overlaps and what gaps might exist. So we're incorporating that now. Again, a lot of what you see under each of the three scenarios there are tasks that are in process or will need to occur or that we're wondering about. Scenarios 1 and 2 are obviously going to present some significant challenges for 287 if the CDC and MDH guidelines remain the same as they are now. And based on the guidance that they gave us, it would appear that that they will. It will be difficult for all of us. The guidance also states that schools are to offer distance learning to students that are medically vulnerable or are unable or unwilling to return in person or in hybrid learning. So essentially, you could say that scenario 1 will end up being a hybrid configuration no matter which way you spin it. And we don't know to what extent until the time comes, but as you know, we do have a lot of students with underlying health conditions. You've all probably seen or heard about as well the financial predictions about the cost of reopening in the fall. And to maintain current CDC guidelines, ASBO, the Association of School Business Officials, they estimated it would cost on average an average size school district of around, I think it was 3,500 students, $2 million. we certainly anticipate it will cost us more than that. The cost of PPE and transportation alone would be very high, and for all of us. The planning work group, along with incident command, including our principals, we're organizing ourselves now into work groups. We're just getting into the groove and figuring out how to work through this huge task. And we are planning for all three scenarios, and at the same time accounting for the many nuances that we have in 287. We're developing customized plans for our varied programs, our sites, and our departments to be prepared for these scenarios. Like all of you and your districts, we're starving for more specificity, but we're just going to have to hang tight and be okay with that. But there is one thing that we do know now from some aggregate de-identified data that we received from health partners. For all the employees that have health insurance through 287, we know that about 20% of our staff members have underlying health conditions, which is fairly significant, and we actually anticipate that it's higher than that. Given we don't know what we don't know about the staff that don't have health insurance with us, but we're thinking it's higher. And the last thing I want to mention is, and it's one of our guiding principles in the plan, and that is to maintain alignment with the planning that's happening in your districts. And we've been collaborating with your districts to the extent that we can at this time with what we know around transportation and just planning for all of the IEPs that we're going to have to be taking a look at. It's a lot, and it's going to be challenging for us and for all of your districts, given the budgetary and logistical challenges that we're facing. So with that, I'll stop there. And Madam Chair, if there are any questions or comments, I'd be happy to take those now.
Thank you for the background, Chad, and thank you to your team for this tremendous amount of work. Did someone have a little shout out with a question? Steve Adams. Steve, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair Neville. Chad, I saw that information about $2 million for a school district of 3,700 kids.
Yep.
I didn't see that article. Do you know where those additional costs come from? Is that personnel? Is that transportation? Or
yes, it is. It's yeah, that's a great question, Stephen. It's personal protective equipment, it's transportation, additional costs with food service. It's they factored in a lot of those things when they put that cost analysis together.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's kind of daunting.
Yes, indeed it is.
Considering the size of some of our districts.
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
Yes, thank you.
Additional questions or comments?
Madam Chair, this is Director Douglas, if I may.
Yes, please.
Yes. So a couple of things. I just want to say thank you for going over the information with us. And I really appreciate that you highlight that there are still a lot of unknowns, especially when it comes to our own staff and students, that there may be conditions that we're not aware of. And that we have to still think proactively about that likelihood. I also am wondering about our population of staff and students, and not just teachers, but all of our staff, and what kind of anecdotal information do we have, or data, or both, to really, I guess, dig into what the people that we serve are asking for. And the reason I ask this is because I am a parent of children who meet that high risk category. Obviously, their needs are not as great as many of our students, and they're not served by 287. They're served in our home district. But we have a high risk family. And my personal belief is that it would benefit them more, my family personally, to be in school than to be in any kind of hybrid situation. And then there's a lot of people who feel that way. I've shared that information publicly, and as a result, a lot of families who are also in that high risk category have come to me and said, we feel the same way, because even though we have these risk factors, they exist with or without coronavirus. And the detrimental effects of learning from home are significantly greater than the risk to us of sending our child to school. And I know that ultimately we're going to have to follow the government's direction, right? But I was just curious if we have any of that kind of information, what are the people that we're serving actually feeling? And I'm sure that there's a mix of feelings, but I'm just wondering if we're hearing about it.
I'm really glad that you asked that question, Heather, and I failed to mention that, and that is an important part of our planning process. We just finalized our staff survey that we're going to send to staff to understand how they're feeling from a safety standpoint and getting feedback from them about the return to school in the fall. And we are close to being done with the family survey as well. And we'll be sending that out to families to understand where they're at and how they're feeling about the return to school next fall. And so that is going to be sent out in early July, and that will be used to help us in planning and understanding exactly where our staff and our families and our students are at. So definitely, great question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sam Sant, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Also regarding the scenario 2 with the hybrid learning environment, being that if we don't get adequate funding from the state or federal government, is our district adequately funded to take on these additional costs of $2 million plus if we need to?
Well, that is a great question. And I'm going to open that one up to anybody that would like to assist me with that. But I would say, actually, I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to hand that over to Sandy or May.
All right, I'll start. Thank you, Chad. Excellent question. And I'm sure every school district is wondering that same thing, right? We all know we're coming off a year that we already expended money that had not been planned as we needed to move into a distance learning format. We know the state government, the fund balance for Minnesota dropped significantly. So any raises in state aid were basically tabled for school districts, along with a lot of other services. It is a very serious situation. You'll hear our budget report in just a little bit. There's no doubt that if we were needing to fully fulfill all those guidelines, we would need additional, likely federal help. That is being discussed at the federal level. Where it goes is anybody's guess. Along with the figure that Chad mentioned, I read today in one congressional committee, the figure of $1.2 million per school in your district is what's needed to comprehensively cover the additional costs. That is something that I'm sure is going to be debated. We don't know whether there'll be additional money, but it definitely will be a significant budgetary challenge, not only for 287, but likely for most school districts. May, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, so we'll cover a little bit of this in our budget planning. So we do have some funding set aside in our budget planning. We are pursuing every avenue that we can. So there are like the personal protective equipment and the training for staff for sanitization that can be paid for by FEMA. So we're applying for those funds to kind of cover those costs. So we're going to pursue every avenue that we can to raise funds to help offset these additional costs. Now, if we have to bring back every student to school every day, that, you know, those costs I don't know that any district is in a situation right now where they would be able to 100% cover all of those costs that would be needed to comply with all the requirements that we have right now. So.
Thank you for the background. Additional questions or comments?
Madam Chair, I would just add one more thing, and that's
Yes.
that obviously we have a somewhat unique situation with our student population. I have been in contact with the Department of Health, the individual that has been working with our district and myself has been extremely helpful on a basis of really knowing the population of kids because she worked in a similar educational setting in her past. So she has been very helpful. She was going to be in a meeting this week with the CDC to add a layer of guidance on one-to-one kind of situations, which is a lot of what we have in terms of students to staff. So each week we tend to get a little bit more information that helps channel us in the direction that we will eventually go. But I think that's one of the most challenging things is that it continues to evolve. And as you all know, this virus is going to do what it's going to do. So we have to be very nimble. Again, I appreciate all the staff that have been working on this committee. There's a lot more work to do, and we'll keep the board and our school communities up to date as we further that work.
Thank you. That it is certainly detailed work and working with a lot of unknowns and high expectations. So thank you very much. We will certainly be hearing more on this, I know. So thank you all. We'll move on to item 6.3, our student safety coach model update. There's been a lot of really exciting press about 287's work here. So Superintendent Lewandowski, I would invite you to introduce this.
Thank you. We're having a bit of a media week with Tanya's NPR interview and an article put out by MinPost today on our school safety coach model. And there's another one or two articles coming out, we think, sometime in the next week. So we thought it was a great opportunity to showcase for the board the model that we have. It also continues to evolve, and it looks different today than what we started, but we do believe it's really a strong model that is one that we think has served us well. And so with us tonight, we have Mr. Theon Jarrett, who is one of our school safety coach managers and has been with the program, I believe, since the first year or at least the second year. And so we're grateful for him being in that role and his leadership. And you'll see him quoted probably again in the near future. And Rachel Hicks, who's been organizing the media events. The two of them are going to share our model for you tonight. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm going to go ahead. Oh, Chad is going to present the screen for us. Thank you, Chad. You can go ahead and move to the next slide. I just wanted to kick us off by giving a short review of some of the media attention that you probably have seen some of it, and you'll continue to see throughout this week and likely next week as well. Most of it has been local. The MinPost article, we'll be talking with the Star Tribune next week, and then NPR as well. And then 74 Million is an educational news outlet that's online exclusively. And we did an extremely extensive interview with them. We spent over 6 hours with this reporter, and he spoke with all the names that you see listed on the right there. So Theon Jarrett, our manager, 4 of our student safety coaches, Sandy and Janie Tiedemann from South Education Center, as well as one of our students who was a recent graduate and has had experience both in in his home high school, having school resource officers, and in 287 having school safety coaches. And I am really excited for the 74 million article to come out. We think it's going to be a pretty comprehensive piece, and as well as a very personalized piece. This reporter covered absolutely the model, the evolution of it, the data, the success that we've had, but he also spent a lot of time getting to know our staff and really listened to their personal stories of how they got into this work. And what I kind of realized throughout this process and listening to our staff as well on these interviews is that this is not just their work, this is their life's work. And really the personal connectedness that they have to the student safety coach model is pretty extraordinary. And I had a feeling of just how fortunate 287 is to have these individuals in our SSC positions. And then, you know, I think the context is pretty important. We've seen Minneapolis and St. Paul around us pulling out of their contracts with police departments. And, you know, I'm sure this is a narrative that is happening in, you know, perhaps some of our member districts and certainly a lot of urban school districts across the country. As far as we know, we're the only model like this. We haven't been able to identify another school district that has removed police officers from their buildings. And I know there's a lot of anxiety for communities around this. So I really hope that our model and our media attention, and I think requests from school districts around us to learn more about what we've done, can really move our country in a direction that I think we really need to go, and that our school district, as a trauma sensitive and healing centered school district, has already started moving in that direction. Chad, go ahead and move the slide. I just want to point out here, when we talk about any of our programs and efforts and initiatives, just where it lands within the strategic priorities of our district. And this is definitely one of the parts of our trauma sensitive and healing centered practices, as well as part of our well-being for students. I really just want to share that, you know, I think Theon will share more about the evolution, and it's still that the SSC model is still a work in progress. And, you know, part of this transition for us is around how we as a school district view our kids. And, you know, this is still, it's about the implementation and the work in the model, but it's also about the mindset that we have in interacting with our students. And, you know, it does require a mindset shift from consequences and punishment to the recognition of the mental health issues and the trauma that our students have experienced. And so our model really does emphasize this idea that, you know, we do not have, our kids are not bad. They're not bad kids. They're not doing things intentionally to push buttons or to cause trouble or be troublemakers. Their actions and the behaviors of our students are truly because of their disabilities, because of the trauma that they've experienced. And it is a shift, and still a shift that's happening in our district too, among our staff, in really moving into that mindset. So our SSC model has, I think, helped that shift and help our staff view kids and their behaviors in a different way. Slide. Go ahead, Theon.
Hello, hi, everyone. A reason why we feel like we need, as a district, we need this change, right? For changing from SROs to SSCs, that model is, one of the big ones was the to stop criminalizing mental health and disabilities. So our young people with mental health issues and with disabilities, we didn't want to have police involved with them at all, right? Mainly because that's not the police training. That's not their training. They're not experts in that field, right? Also, the SROs weren't the SSCs are more cost effective than the SROs. Actually, I don't even think we can even, it's not even comparable, right? What we get from SROs compared to what we get out of SSCs, right? SROs are typically when a crisis happens in the school, right? And the staff and kind of work through it. If it escalates to that you need the SRO or whatever, all of the work has already been done, basically, and then you call the SRO if it bubbles beyond what we can do as staff, right? And so, but having SSCs, that whole process, SSCs work through that whole process. One, they're probably familiar with the student already, right? So have some type of relationship with the student, know the student's mental health diagnosis, knows the student's positive behavior plan, right? And knows goals and expectations of what the student wants to do. And so, and can rely on those things. SRO would just come in because they just want to, I feel they want to come in, control and stop whatever the behavior or the crisis is happening, and using whatever they need, their tactics, where they need to stop them, right? And that mindset is, we don't want that in our schools. I feel we want a much softer, gentler, more therapeutic approach, which our SSCs do, right? Race plays a big role, right, in the way I feel the SROs responded to our students. When I started with the district in 2015, November 2015, I was an educational assistant, and it was all new. My first time in education, it was all really new to me, and I didn't understand. We have two officers. They were actually detectives, two detectives in our building, right? And I was like, wow, this is very interesting. But they were never really involved in the school. They will have surface conversations with our students, like, hey, and just like shoot the breeze a little bit. But the staff that actually do the work and actually really care about the students, right? It just wasn't the SROs, right? The number 3 I got there, the recognized, I'm talking about racism still, is the systemic racism is playing out in our face right now, right? We see it, we're all are feeling it and being a part of it, right? It's really close to home right now, right? I mean, there's a lot of things going on. So yeah, okay. And the last one is, the number 4 is police involvement, right? And when we first, so I was one of the first of the 4 SSCs, right? And I work at South Education, and when I said that we had the 2 detectives working in the school, it was really like they could use their discretion on when they respond to a situation, if they want to write a citation, so a ticket, or arrest the student and handcuff them and call a car and bring them downtown to the supervision center. They got to use their discretion in that. And with that is our students, when they go down to the supervision center, they walk, so they're getting embarrassed. We're adding trauma to them. We're basically young Black men, right? They're already over policed in their own communities, right? And then they come to school, and then they're still being over policed, right? And so just because they have a mental illness, and the way it plays out, it comes out as some type of behavior, right? And the police might say, hey, I'm writing you a ticket for that. You getting a citation, a 5th degree assault for whatever it is. And they get handcuffed, they get a citation, and then they call a car and come and pick them up. but then they come back the next day, right? And so what the SSCs do, we add, we build to their toolbox, right? We try to work with the students and try to get to the root of really what is really going on, why you feel this way. And so how can we support you, listen to you, validate you, and so we can move on, add skills to you, right? Because you're gonna need those skills when you're out in your community, right? So yeah, that's a reason why we start the approach. Next slide, yeah, okay, the timeline. So like I said, I was one of the first SSCs. We started with 4 SSCs, 3 at West Education Center, and then we have 1 at Northwest Tech, right? And so if this model, I feel like, is super dynamic, right? It's dynamic and it's changing and it's growing, because we started with 4 a couple years ago on SSCs, and not in all the buildings, to today where we got 10 SSCs. We have the SSC in every building. We have 2 SSCs in every building, and then we have a float for Ann Bremer and North, and we have a float for South and West Educational Center. So if they need a little extra support, if someone is out sick or whatever, staff and students are still going to get the same level of support, and sometimes you can get a little extra support, right? All right, next slide. Okay, so now some of the core values of this model, right? To me, being an SSC, I was SSC, then I was a district-wide roamer float, and so I worked in all the schools. And one of the main things that stuck out to me is that, and still does, is that building relationships with student is pivotal, right? If you have a student and you're trying to de-escalate them, you're trying to have them, you want to de-escalate them so they can get back to class, right? That's the ultimate goal. And if you don't have a relationship, if you don't buy into the student, if you don't let the student know that you care about them, right? The students are going to say, hey, who are you? Get out of my face. I don't care whatever you have to say. Like, actually get out of my space, right? Because you're setting me off. So building a relationship with the students is pivotal to me. I feel that the SSCs are able to have that skill and ability to be able to build relationships with not just one type of student, but all our students, right? And we have a lot of different students, a lot of different programs throughout our buildings. Also, SSCs take the temperature of the building and students. So SSCs screen students when they come in, when they get off the bus. So they're like, hey, good morning, how are you doing? And so they can see if a student is a bit off in the morning, right? They recognize that. And one thing that they might do is, after screening everyone in, is circle back and go check in with that student, or go check in with the student's support staff, you know, and saying like, what's going on? How can I support you? Or what do you need, right? So just being mindful of that, right? And that's a big deal. And being proactive. So after screening students in and walking the building, sitting in classrooms and modeling how, for students and for staff, how to be in a classroom, how to raise your hand and ask questions, how to be involved in the classroom, right? How to be appropriate in the things that you're doing, right? That is a big deal. SSCs coach and model and a lot for everyone in the building, I feel, right? And restorative practices. So incident happens, especially a critical incident, and it's all in the same program. So we don't have a lot of space, and we have to coexist, even if it's in a classroom. So and then if it happens between 2 students, you know, I will say, like, most of our SSCs are circle keepers. So they're trained in how to do restorative practices. So they'll hold the circle, they'll ask the right questions and try to get to the bottom of really what's going on, the issue, right? Give students a space to do that, right? And a couple of things that I feel like are important and not on there, right? Really, right? Coaching staff, I said that a lot, but also partnershiping with the admin in the building. So communication is a big deal, right? Because we don't want any of our staff just working at schools and kind of doing anything they kind of want to do, right? So communication and collaboration with staff, so we can do what's best for our students. Right? And also, I always refer to when someone asks me like, what does the SSCs do? Like, tell me what the day looks like. And the best way for me to explain this, like I say, they're the glue to the schools, right? So if I have to write out a job description on what the SSCs do, it'd be like 4 or 5 pages long, I feel, because they do a lot of different things, and it changes from site to site, from school to school, right? And from program to program, and it's a lot of things that they do, and you have to have a lot of skills, a lot of patience, and be open completely. But the biggest thing there, one, you have to be willing to build relationships, like authentic, genuine relationships with our students, right? And just be flexible and open to learn and change, because this is education, so things are always changing, and you got to kind of not take it personal and kind of go with the flow, right? So yeah, that's some of the core things in the model. Some of the trainings that they go through, I'm just going to go through them real quick. Mental health, first aid, de-escalation, crisis intervention, crime prevention, but I'm going to stop at crisis intervention. So that's the CPI and the de-escalation. So to me, those are key. And most of our SSCs we spend a lot of time on de-escalation techniques, right? Because when we use the CPI, and the number 4, the 4th step on CPI is, I want to say, is a physical intervention. And we are not trying to do that at all, right? We have a process we get before we have to go to before we get to the physical intervention. Now, less is when we respond into a situation and it's completely unsafe, and we have to do a physical intervention right now to keep the student, staff, or the situation safe. But typically, when we respond to a situation, it's all about de-escalation. So even if it's waiting the student out or just being quiet in the space, right, until the student is ready to talk to you, and then listen, right, and then validate, and then advocate for the student, right? And if you do those things, the student's you can rely on your relationship, right? The student's gonna probably, you're gonna get them to a space where they're ready to go back to class most of the time, right? When you think about SROs, I feel like I see when SROs come in, they come in, the main thing they want to do is control the situation, right? And you direct, dictate, and to our students with mental illness, like when you tell a student, hey, if a SRO says you need to sit down, and I've seen this firsthand, you need to sit down, and the student's like, no, first of all, I can't sit down because I feel uncomfortable in my body, right? And if you don't sit down, I'm going to physically make you sit down, right? That's wrong. We don't want that, not at all, right? So SSC's understanding, hey, you got to pace. I understand that, but you're talking to me a little bit as you're pacing. It might not look like everyone wants it to look like, but guess what? The student he's calming down, she is calming down, and you're talking to me, right? And I don't have to physically and put my hands on you at all, right? Which is, in my experience, is just different than the SROs, right? Okay, all right, next slide. Yep, sorry. So again, I just said, we have 10 SSCs, which the program is continuously growing, and I appreciate it, and it's awesome. The support we get from the district is great, and the staff is awesome. The staff call on SSCs to do a lot because the SSCs have a really good relationships with most of the students in the building. So we're talking 2 SSCs, maybe 3 sometimes, have really great relationships with all the students in the building. That's amazing, right? So some of the backgrounds of the SSCs, most of them all were educational assistants. All when we started this, and even the first round, the second round, maybe even the third round, they all were internal candidates, right? And so the internal candidates that probably was one, going above and beyond their job, and two, showing the leaders in their buildings that one, they're here because they're student centered. The only thing that matters to them is the positive outcomes for their student, keeping their students safe, meeting their students' basic needs, right, and trying to build in some capacity in their students, like fill up their toolbox, right? So I mean, that's where we are right now. That's why we got the 10 really good SSCs right now. Next slide, please. Okay, so this one is difficult for me because I've been through a lot of situations, and I see them all as positive because they're all teachable moments. Like I'm into that. I'm into like teaching young people how to work through whatever they're going through, like whatever they're feeling. It's hard because I can't feel it, and I can just try to be as open and as mindful as possible, right? And try to support, listen to, and validate, and advocate. So I'm just going to say this is a little situation that is kind of fresh to me, and I remember. So I remember being at a school, and a student was dysregulated. You know, he was yelling, walking up down hallways. He was very upset, destroying property. So he wasn't like breaking glass or anything, but just throwing stuff and trying to, like the little soap dispensers, destroying those, throwing everything all over the place. The student finally goes into his classroom. He goes in the classroom and he's still very upset, dysregulated. He picks up a pair of scissors, right? Staff immediately calls SSCs. SSCs come to support. And when they get there, they assess the scene. It didn't look like anyone's in immediate danger, but you know, we want to keep the dignity of our students, right? We don't want to like having other students like really know when our students are really in a situation, they're struggling. Other students don't need to be around seeing that. So we just said, we remove the audience. So ask the teacher, hey, can I kind of work with the student right now and try to get this going? So everyone left the classroom. Eventually the SSCs were able to, they didn't have to do a physical intervention right away because the student wasn't saying like, yo, I'm gonna hurt myself or I'm gonna hurt somebody else with these scissors, right? But it's still a threat, right? He has scissors in his hand and we don't know, and you quickly can cut something on yourself, right? So, you know, keeping close, so that's the defensive techniques, right? So we're getting close, but we're not getting too close that the student is feeling uncomfortable and that we're threatening them, right? And trying to keep the conversation very light and positive and let the student lead the conversation. So if you got two SSCs there, he said, hey, I'm not talking to one of you, but I'll talk to the other one. So the other one just backs off and won't say anything, right? And being mindful of that, right? Because the ultimate goal is that we want to keep the student safe. We want to get the scissors out the hands, keep the student safe, and then try to get to the root of why you feel like you need to pick scissors up and destroy property, right? And then add to your toolbox. So next time you're feeling that way, maybe we can give you some coping skills, or maybe you can sit down with us and identify for yourself as a student some coping skills that you might help you, through that. So de-escalation techniques is a huge thing, and having the SSCs be a part of IEP meetings, reading and knowing some of our students that when you look at the data, some of the students are responsible for some of the more behaviors, right? So they might have 2 or 3 behaviors a week or whatever. So looking at that data, so being part of those teams, being part of the PBSP and reading and knowing it, right? Knowing the student's mental health diagnosis, SROs don't do that. They won't even care. If you give an SRO a IEP and it's wordy and it's lengthy, right? Like, get out of here. I don't want that, right? And because what they're trained on to do is, I meet force with force and I can stop it, control it, with the stuff on my belt, right? We don't want that in our schools, right? We don't want SROs controlling students because we don't control anything. We don't control students. We work with, we support, we build skills, with our students, Yeah, I think that's the last one. I think it's you, Rachel.
Yeah. So as we've been talking with reporters and requests from districts come in after they hear about the model, the first question they ask is, well, is it working and what data do you have to back it up? So I wanted to share some of the data pieces that we have shared with reporters with you now. First here is just the reliance on the police. It's really shifted. Not only have our incidents with police involvement decreased by half over 2 years, but really what we're seeing is a shift that in situations where previously police were called and they were involved to address a situation, now they're shifting to be, dealt with through de-escalation and or mental health, which is exactly what we want. Now on average of all the interactions that our SSCs have with our students, only 2% of those interactions result in needing a police response. So the numbers are there from the last few years. Just this past fall, it was 15 incidents where police response were needed. And, we're being frank about that. On occasion, we do need to call 911 and have police intervene in situations. Arrests, and I'll show another slide next that shows a little more distinctly about this data. But at this point, we're averaging about 5 arrests per school year under the student safety coach model. Restrictive procedures on average, our physical holds are only needed in about 18% of the situations where SSCs are used in student situations. And perhaps most importantly, Theon talked about the importance of that relationship with students and being able to use that relationship capital with students in situations that here we're seeing that about 30% of the interactions that SSCs have with our students result in, which really means that are being redirected to become positive student interactions. So those are situations where there's a complete reversal of, an SSC is called in for what is seemingly a negative interaction and then is turned into a positive interaction. Next slide. And I wanted to revisit that arrest data. It's perhaps the most compelling data that we have on the SSC model. The data points here are from West Education Center, where this was our initial pilot school before we moved it across the district. So in 14-15 and 15-16, where we had SROs in the building, we had 63 and 65 arrests that year in one school, West Education Center. The pilot year, it dropped drastically from 65 to 12 arrests. And then, since then, we've just looked at the district average across the district, 5 arrests per year. So, when we talk about this model, stopping that pipeline to prison, when we talk about this model, decriminalizing student mental health, this is the data that I think we can point to that shows how successful this model really has been with students that, on the spectrum of need are the highest need students in our region. Next slide.
Yeah, can I say a little bit? Sorry. Can I add to that a little bit?
Please, go ahead.
To me, just from my experience and being in a school and watching a young male that looks like me handcuffed and walked out of school, to me, that's traumatizing for me, and I'm an adult, right? So even though we try to keep students away when that's happening or whatever, but just imagine that. Look at that. Those numbers are very compelling to me, because to be a part of that complete shift of not criminalizing the mental health of our students, working with, supporting, and giving them, and trying to give them what they need, so they're not getting arrested and handcuffed and walk out of our buildings. That not only traumatizes the student that it's happened to, but all the other students and adults around, especially if you look like me or the student that's being walked out. That's all I want to say on that.
You're on the next slide.
Oh, this is my slide. So we're talking about, these are, the number is, I want to say, is the call for service is 60%, is 440 calls for service, and the self-initiated is 291. So add those together in 4 months, we have SSCs were involved with students 731 times district-wide, right, in 4 months. There was call for service 60% of those times, and 40% of the times they were self-initiated, right? That goes back to the being proactive, sitting in classrooms, taking the temperature of the student in this building, in the school when in the morning time, right? So some of the actions that taken, so SSCs write daily logs and reports, and this is where we get this data from. So some of the actions that they're taking is nearly 40% of the call for service or the self-initiated students are able to get de-escalated. Probably before they de-escalated, they get their basic needs met, right? So it could be like, hey, I didn't get enough food last night. I'm hungry, and I come to school. So SSCs, along with other staff, are going to say, we're going to get you some extra food or whatever, and then we're going to get you back to class, right? Because that's the ultimate goal. We want to keep our students in class. So 40% of their interactions, the students go to class. 20% of the students return to their individual learning centers, which is also basically returning back to class, depending on what program that you work in, right? So some of our students have very customized learning spaces, so they might have to go back to their individual learning spaces, meaning that you're not in the hallways doing something, getting in any kind of trouble. You probably go back to your class. That's kind of the same thing. But the number that sticks out to me is basically it says 26% of the interactions that the SSCs have with our students are their positive student interactions. That to me, that's a big thing. So if I'm SSC, I get called because a student is dysregulated, and I'm able to support the student, get the student what his needs, and return to class or get them or go wherever they need to do. And that's a positive interaction with the student, right? So, and I think that's a great thing to me. And return to class is awesome, right? Out of that number, 731, the percentage of restricted procedures that we use is only 20%. It's 19.7%. Out of those calls that we come to and respond to, only 20%, almost only 20%, that we have to use a physical intervention with our students, right? So the other 80% that we don't have to utilize a physical intervention, that's where the de-escalation technique comes in, waiting students out, right? Listening to students, supporting, all those things. Yeah, that's it. Next slide, please. You're muted.
Good, because I told a really corny joke, which I won't repeat. We have just a couple of days ago received a draft of the report from the Wilder Foundation, from their research folks that have been looking at the SSC model and looking at staff perceptions of the model. So that is still in draft form, and I'm guessing as soon as it's finalized, Sandy, we would send that out to the board to share more information. But we do have some data points here that we pulled from the report around staff perceptions, that almost 80% of staff agree that the SSCs build trusting relationships with students. Almost 75% agree that staff or that SSCs help students cool down when they're in a crisis. And same thing, very positive results that SSCs help our students build positive behaviors. So we'll have more data on this for you soon as it's finalized. That's the extent of what we wanted to share with you today, and I'm sure you do have questions, and we're happy to take them.
Thank you so much, Rachel and Theon. Your depth of knowledge and experience is so impressive, and the data speaks for itself. Heather, could you start us out with your question or comment?
Yes, I have questions and comments. So the first couple of things I wanted to say is a huge thank you to both Theon and Rachel. It is absolutely evident that both of you are really invested in this work and have a strong passion for it. And so I just wanted to say thank you for that. And that also I feel like that just solidifies that you guys should be doing this work because you're obviously really invested in it, and it just shines through when you're talking about it. So I just wanted to say that to you. I had my business mind was thinking for a minute as you were talking about how other people are reaching out to our district and interested in what are we doing and how are we doing it, how do we make it work. And I don't know who to ask this question of, but is it possible that we could capitalize on this model and share it with other districts in a way that brings us revenue to expand upon this program in our district? I don't know if that's possible or not, but that's just something for you guys to chew on and think about. And then a couple of other thoughts that I had were, it's really evident that this is a model that is really working for our students. The change of behaviors and the way that things are handled in our district has obviously had a tremendous impact on our students. And Theon, like you mentioned, this is also impacting staff and not just the students who are being addressed by SROs, but the people around them who are witnessing it. This impacts everybody in the organization. And so I think it's important to highlight that, but also I am wondering about, so unfortunately, sometimes we still have to call the police. And unfortunately, sometimes that still results in arrests or just the presence of having an officer there can be detrimental and really hard for kids. And a couple of things that I think about are, is there a way that we can have a relationship with our police officers, but that this is our first line? And what I mean is that I know that some police departments, and I know that our schools are affected by multiple police departments. So this would have to be really a bigger picture situation. But I know there are police departments in Minnesota and other states that maybe we could research that have specific programming for SROs to give them the kind of training that our SSCs have, so that they can better understand that these kids have different needs than the general population. And that just because they see a student who may appear to be an adult, that their mindset is not going to be the same as an average adult, and that you need to respond to these children significantly differently, and that their pacing isn't a sign of non-compliance, but it's a coping mechanism. And that I'm just wondering if we can develop contracts so that when we have to call, when we can't handle the situation in school, that we have specific officers who have had specific additional training to be able to handle those situations better than your average officer. If we have those relationships, if that will even decrease the situations where a student ends up being arrested even further, to get that number to 0. You know, and I don't know if that's possible or not, but I just know that there are some officer training programs available. And if we had a specific SRO who was trained and handpicked for their aptitude for working with youth, that we might be able to even better serve our students in this way. Because I know that right now, when you call 911, you just get whoever's next on deck. And that person might be really aggressive, and they might not be great with people, and they might be even worse with kids. And they might not understand the nuances, like, especially Theon, you brought up a lot of really important facts and pieces that I think that even the general population doesn't understand about the needs of our kids, that their behaviors are not necessarily a reflection of, you know, who they are, and that they're not trying to do the right thing. But like you said, very plainly, it might just be that they're really hungry and they're having a bad day and they don't know how to express what's going on. And if we just get some officer who's coming in and they're, you know, on the SWAT team training program and not the SRO training program, their response is going to be significantly different than somebody who's had additional training to work with students. And so I'm just wondering, you know, is there a way that we can collaborate with those police departments so that when we do have to make that call, we're able to reduce those incidences even further? But otherwise, I had one more question. Can I have a meeting with the two of you so that I can bring back some ideas about how we could implement a program like this in my home district? That's it. Thank you.
Awesome. I guess I'll try to answer it as best as I can. So, you know, what the district did last summer is that we went around to each of the police precincts that patrolled our schools, right? So we went to New Hope, Richfield, Brooklyn Park, and so on, right? So in Minnetonka, and had a conversation with the chiefs, right? And try to kind of explain to them like what our mission and what we are trying to do, right? And I think that went over really well because I personally seen the difference between last year when police come to a certain school to this year when police come to a certain school. They're more, they want to work with us, and they say, like, basically, we're the experts. How can I support you? Which is a great thing, right? Yeah. But sometimes what happens with that, you know, like being a police officer is like any other job. You have changeover. You have people working different shifts. You know, you might have people working different shifts who are not mindful and didn't know what the chief says or follow those, and are abrasive when you come to a school, right? Because the mindset, I feel, the mindset of a police officer, right? They want to control the situation, and it looks chaotic, right? And it's not. It's just their perspective. That's all that is. So I feel like we have partnered and collaborated with the police districts, precincts in our districts, and we continue to do that to try to make sure that when we need police officers, right, the way that you come, right, we have parameters of and expectations of what we want you to do when you come, and we just want you to follow those expectations. But we still run into time to time. The problem is you got a new cop. You got a cop who's working night shift, now he's working day shift, and he responds, right? And he's just used to coming and being controlling situations. That's when we come in like, excuse me, this is what we need. This is where we need the support. Can you do that? And the problem is that I can't tell a police officer how to do their job. They're going to do it how they feel like they need to do it, right? So the main thing I can do there is support our students and make sure they're safe and keep them in dignity as much as possible, right, during that. But thank you for those questions. Those are good questions.
Yeah, you know, I guess to your point about the changing of shifts and all of that, I I would offer that I think that it would be beneficial for us to have contracts with those police departments saying that when you send an officer, this is how we expect it to go, so that everybody's on the same page. And I don't know if that's possible, Sandy, if we can figure something like that out, but really reducing this prison to pipeline path and making sure that when an officer comes in, they know these are the expectations and this is how we do things and that kind of stuff.
Thank you. Thank you, Heather. We'll certainly take those thoughts back and talk about it, and welcome any opportunity to talk to police departments or to other districts that might want to talk about this model. I think it was Theon that said we are evolving each year. We learn how to do it a little differently and a little better, and I think that's what's going to continue. But overall, I think what I tell people is look to the needs of the kids and then build your model to meet those needs. That's where your solution is. So we do have some police departments that work well with us and know us better than others. But for the most part, we're just trying to work as collaboratively as we can in each community.
We have a couple of other questions and comments. We'll hear from Crystal Brackey first, followed by Steve Adams, and then I see Michelle Kuntz. So Michelle, you will follow Steve. So Crystal, go ahead, please.
Sure. My question is, about all of the schools and districts that are thinking about making this change. If you can share more either about what the transition process looked like within 287 or the biggest pieces of wisdom that you are sharing right now with others that are considering making this change.
Well, I'll give one and let Theon and Rachel mention anything they'd like. I think what's important is these kids are very close to being adults, right? Already. And so they're going to be out in communities, and hopefully we can give them as many skills as they can to be successful in their communities. But we also, I think, are trying to emphasize that I think the slide that Rachel showed, these are not bad kids. They're kids that are reacting to who they are. Sometimes they have disabilities that are causing issues. Sometimes there's trauma. Sometimes it's what happened the night before. And I think the message that I would give as people transition is the one I just said. Look to what the kids need and build your solution based on that. I think that's what ultimately prompted us to make a transition, because the kids didn't need what we were getting. Police were doing perhaps what they were trained to do, but it wasn't what the kids needed. And so start with that, and the solution will come.
Yeah, I echo that completely. Being student-centered is this is why we're here. This is why we do what we do, right? And having other like-minded people on the SSC team that are able to do that. Like, I'm not just talking about like saying like, hey, I'm student-centered, but I'm not going to stay 5 minutes late to wait for a student on the bus. No, I'm talking about can be completely student-centered and only think about the student first and foremost, and then build on from outside of that, right? Also, people instinctively just don't like change, especially adults don't like change. And so when you go from, you got SROs in the building to next year you don't have SROs, you got a lot of adults saying, I don't feel safe, right? What? You don't feel safe? So having a lot of like building capacity in adults when they say stuff like that, right? And try to get to the bottom of, what they're really saying and what the meaning is to that, right? And try to get them comfortable with it, because this is what we want to do, because we want to stop criminalizing mental illness. We want to stop adding trauma to students. And if you don't agree with those things, you need to ask yourself, why are you doing what you're doing? I mean, that's my personal opinion. Yeah.
I will just add as a response, these are actually Theon's words from the news article today, but I think it is an extremely important point when it comes to other districts that are considering a model like this. And it says, it certainly helps to have a strong vision from district and building leaders. He adds, those looking to chart a similar path forward will need someone at the top to champion it, someone who can articulate over and over the beliefs driving the change, the need to stop the over-policing of students of color, to stop criminalizing mental health. I think that, Theon's point in there in having a leader at the top looking at, this is not just a novelty because of George Floyd's murder, that there's a trend for districts to do this, and in a couple of years it could revert. This is because you have foundational beliefs and a mindset about how our society needs to change and how we need to treat our students differently. In particular, our Black boys and our students of color in general.
Thank you. We're going to hear next from Steve Adams, who will be followed by Michelle Kuntz and then Sam Sant. So Steve, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair Neville. Rachel, I read your article that was in the MSBA journal here a couple months ago, and forwarded a copy of it to our superintendent and our board chair as something to think about. And now it seems like everyone's thinking about it. So it's become a commonplace discussion. But I was wondering, what was the prior, I know we had SROs before. How many SROs did we have as a district? And how many safety coaches do we have now? Is it 1-to-1?
I'll take a first attempt at that. I think before I do, I think a factor we haven't mentioned is over this period of time, we have seen the level of student need rise dramatically. So even from that standpoint, it's not an even comparison. So I just want to put that out there.
Right.
We typically in the history of the SROs, we're starting with one SRO
Cool.
and in each school except for Richfield. Richfield was the one precinct or jurisdiction, I should say, that just felt they could handle it without putting an SRO in the early days. So there were no SROs in that based on Richfield's preference. In the other buildings, we started with one, and over time, police departments wanted to put 2 police officers in every building, one to back up the other. So you can see it's kind of a different approach even in that. And I think that wanting to put 2 in each building, number one, prompted us just to pause, and number 2 was very expensive. But we did have some years where there were 2 officers in those other 3 buildings, I believe, each of those other 3 buildings. So now you heard Theon, I believe you said there's at least 2 in every building, and there's a rover that we can send back and forth depending on the day and what the needs are. So that's how they compare.
All right, thank you.
We'll hear next from Michelle Kuntz, followed by Sam Sant. Michelle, you are muted right now. Michelle, can you hear us?
Yes.
There we go.
Oh, sorry, it wasn't working. I'm so sorry.
No,
I'll try and keep this very brief, but as I was listening to you, Theon, and thank you so much for your really candid explanations and your own personal thoughts. It was really powerful. I can't remember if the SROs came in full police uniform along with all their little or big weaponry, and how the SSC coaches, what I think what we do is they're just in everyday dress, everyday, not uniformed is what I'm trying to say. And the difference that makes when a policeman walks in and has weapons to the excess versus and bringing trauma just by walking in the door like that. So I wondered if you had any thoughts, and maybe I'm wrong. I don't remember if they were uniformed or not.
Yeah, thank you for your question. The SROs were in full uniform, full police uniform, right? And honestly, when we need to have an officer come to one of our schools, one of the first things we ask is, one, can you come in as discreetly as possible? And two is, if it's available, can you send an officer with plain clothes?
Okay.
Right. And I asked that a million times, and sometimes you get it and sometimes you don't. And we just are at the mercy of who they have on staff right then and there, right? The second one is SSCs, they wear a blue shirt and it says Intermediate District 287 Safety Team, basically. They have long sleeves, short sleeves, and that kind of separates them from everyone else in the building. Also, when SSCs have to go outside of the building, we just got some brand new neon jackets that says, Intermediate District 287 SSC Safety Team, very loudly, because we're in the community and we don't want the community to call police on the SSCs, right? Because you're
Right.
chasing down a student. So yeah.
Yeah. Thank
you
you
for your question. Yeah, thank you.
Sam Sant.
Great presentation. This is a very impressive work. I'm very pleased to hear about this new program with student safety counselors, or student safety coaches, sorry, and what they do. Restorative Practices, I think, is a fairly new practice or procedure. I know we started doing it about a year and a half ago in Robbinsdale, and we've seen a lot of positive outcomes from it. So I'm glad 287 is doing it as well. I think this whole model in general also, like it's been said, will really reduce the student to the school to prison pipeline. I think that's huge that happens in our society, and it starts at the school district level. So I'm glad to see that it's being done here and can serve as a model for all districts throughout this metro, throughout the state, throughout the country. The question I have is for the superintendent. A few meetings ago, we had approved with our workman's comp premiums increases that were substantially large. And being that there's this new program here with student safety coaches, can something like this show that what we're doing is reducing the amount of occurrences that are happening in general and reducing the amount of police presence here, thus reducing the amount of issues that we'd have with our employees getting hurt on the job? Could this in long term or currently reduce those premiums to save us money as well?
Yeah, that's a great question, Sam. I think first, again, I'd go up back and point out that this period of time, the needs of the kids have continued to increase compared to when we had SROs. And we do have a lot of staff injuries. We certainly acknowledge that. What I would suggest, though, that SROs do is, yes, they probably do decrease some of those injuries that would be even more, perhaps, without our SROs. That's hard to quantify just because we're dealing with what ifs. But I think the other thing that probably is important to remember is that the thing that would help us probably the most in reducing those injuries would to have funding for additional professional development for all of our staff. We have very little time outside of the student days to build in substantial professional development. As many of you know, that's something we've lobbied for. We were successful with a 2-year grant that gave us some fairly substantial dollars to do professional development. That has run out now. I think the second thing that would really help us reduce injuries is having kids have mental health, appropriate mental health, racially conscious mental health available to them at the school level. Without a doubt, most of our kids and families are not able or willing to go to a community-based mental health provider. And we know that there's probably services that could be blended into our programs where that access would be much more available to students and families from an appropriate therapist. So those are the two things I believe that would bring down the staff injuries. That would be my, without looking deeper into the data, Sam.
Thank you.
Okay, that concludes the questions that we have. Clearly a rich topic. There's just, thank you so much for the presentation. I'm looking forward to hearing more about this as we continue to use the program and appreciate hearing how it evolves every year. So Theon and Rachel, thank you so much. Our next item is 6.4, the 287 Anti-Racist Leadership Program. Superintendent Lewandowski, could you introduce this, please?
I can. Hopefully you can see me now. Thank you for someone prompting me to put a light on in the background. I think you see a theme here, right? We really take our racial equity work seriously. We're trying to change things, and this is another change that we're working on, and we're bringing you this draft proposal, not only that you are aware, but also want to seek any input you might have. We know that growing our own is a very important tool. We have a Grow Your Own program for licensed teachers. Many of our educational assistants take advantage of that. We also know that we need racially conscious leaders. And while we're working on that, we think that we can add to our toolkit, if you will, another way to help build leadership that is a good fit for our district and for racially equitable kinds of leadership. And so this proposal is designed at this point to do that. And I think Chad is going to give you a little more detail about it.
Yes, thanks, Sandy. Madam Chair, Board Directors, as Sandy said, we have a deep commitment in 287 to racial equity and to building our internal pipeline of anti-racist teachers and leaders. And that includes licensed staff and leaders of color. And we first embarked upon the West Metro partnership to increase the number of licensed staff of color in 287 several years ago. And we were somewhat successful, but we've got a ways to go. There's no doubt about it. We're certainly going to continue our efforts with the West Metro partnership. And we're going to do so to ensure that we're, in fact, making investments in individuals that are serious about their racial consciousness journey towards becoming anti-racist, and to ensure that the instruction and supports in our schools are culturally, ethnically, and racially responsive. Under our umbrella of professional learning in the district, we know that we've had a void in this area of supporting staff members that are motivated to move into leadership positions. So we've recently started drafting this proposal that you see in your packet. And we've also been reviewing it with all the leaders in our district to solicit their feedback. And we've kind of linked it to our book study that we're doing with Dr. Ibram Kendi's book called How to Be an Anti-Racist. And we're reviewing this program proposal along with our equity policy currently. And I'm sure we're going to be reviewing more policies and practices. We're pretty close to finalizing this. It's not finalized. We will bring it back to you all for approval at a future meeting. And I think one thing that's really important to remember about this and our West Metro partnership, which we learned a lot from in the conversations that we've had about this with leaders in our district, it's going to serve us well as we continue to refine and develop this proposal that we'll bring back, but also how we need to redesign our West Metro partnership. We certainly did not have the laser focus on the West Metro partnership in terms of just ensuring that anybody that we bring into this program, that they are, really working on their racial consciousness journey. And so it's been an absolute amazing journey to be on and to work with people from a lot of different backgrounds, different cultures, different races, to collaborate and build something that we all think is really going to achieve the outcomes that we want to see. So I'll stop there, Madam Chair, and take any questions or comments.
Thank you, Chad. I don't see any raised hands, but does anyone have a question or comment? I appreciate the program. And before we got our packet, I had come across the book. Since this is an advantage of being in my office, I just got the copy of Ibram Kendi's book. I had ordered it about a week ago. I came across the reference in some other reading that I was doing, and the program that you're proposing just looks phenomenal. So thank you. I think it's going to have a great outcome. Any other questions or comments? Kim, is that a raised hand, or is your Adam?
There we go. Can you just go into some more detail on what I might have just lost you? Nope, I can see you moving again. Okay. What sorts of programs qualify for the grant award or the award?
So, so with this, there is right now no grant that I'm aware of that it would be funding this. We would be with our West Metro partnership, that was funded with a professional development grant.
Sorry, I mean the $5,000 of reimbursable expenses. I call that a grant. I guess that's not the correct term. It just says that there's an accredited state-approved educational leadership program in the state, or certification degree program, et cetera. I just wanted some examples of what that might be.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So what we tried to do, Adam, is not limit it to just a principalship or things like that. We wanted to open it to all leadership opportunities that would be available in the district. It could be a director of technology. It could be a director of teaching and learning. It could be, it could be numerous things, human resources. And so we wanted to kind of keep that open and, allow people to submit a proposal to the district in terms of, what they were aspiring to do. And that's why we didn't really lock it down to any one particular thing. That was the that was the intent. Obviously, we're still refining the proposal and clarifying questions as they come up. So I think district-wide administrator, site administrator. Does that answer your question?
But is the type of program they would go to, is that part of a degree program? Are there what sort of programs might they enroll in that would qualify under that?
Sure, it could be an educational leadership program through an accredited university in Minnesota, something specific which would culminate in a license. If they were going to be like a principal or a special ed director, it could be even a certification program. For example, if somebody wanted to become a director of human resources or a director of technology, they could go for a certification that would qualify them. There are a lot of accredited certifications in industries that go a long way to vet somebody's qualifications. It could be a 4-year bachelor's degree in an area, maybe such as facilities management. So we really tried to keep an open mind on what those options could be.
Steve, what I can tell you, this is Sandy. One example for our principals, for example, Mankato State has an excellent program that really looks at racial equity, racial consciousness throughout its whole program. That would be one we would say, well, that's optimal, because right from the beginning, if you want to be a principal, that you're going to get that racial equity kind of approach. Not every program would do that. We'd certainly be open to others, but that's what we're looking for, is something that will help grow our leaders in a way that works best for our students.
Crystal.
I'm coming off mute. Sorry, I'm having internet connection problems tonight. What I was just gonna say, because the conversation prompted this real-time thought, is I appreciate that this program seems aimed around action and around real learning and growth. And what prompted me to say that is a former colleague and friend wrote a piece recently, an op-ed about how when Black people are in pain, white people tend to join book clubs. And we read and we read and we talk, and then we talk some more. And it's okay. I see Andrea covering her face. And I just think it's important to acknowledge that there are actions to be done on top of the learning, on top of the reading, on top of the conversations. And I am hopeful that we can get some good learning from having a new program like this that I think is trying to challenge all of us to go beyond just reading the books and having the conversations about the books, and really focusing on concrete action in our own anti-racist leadership. So that's all I wanted to say.
Madam Chair, could I respond briefly?
Certainly.
I just wanted to also emphasize that one of the key tenets of this program is the mentorship component, which we would certainly be able to control and ensure that this individual that would be accepted into this program, or individuals that would be accepted into the program, would be paired with a known leader that possesses the skills that we want to see in our employees, and the beliefs and the values. And with our West Metro partnership, we definitely struggle there, because with depending upon their practicum and who they're paired up with, it's very haphazard. They just basically go with whoever they can get, to be honest with you. And that is something that I think we need to really address moving forward with our West Metro partnership. But this happens to be one thing we can control at the moment. But I know that Tanya is going to be working on this, and we're going to try to really shore that up and partner with our fellow colleges and universities to ensure that that's going to happen moving forward for the West Metro partnership. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions or comments?
I have one. Is it Andrea?
Yes. Is that Andrea? Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead, please.
Just a quick comment to let you know how much I support your thinking around this. The world today has given us a lot more demand from students and community members for leadership in this area. And I think, I'm not speaking about 287, but kind of more in general, there are expectations that just because you're a leader in a school district that you automatically know how to lead this work. And I think that is far from the truth. It's so challenging. There are so many things to learn. And so I think it's just a great premise. I look forward to calling my superintendent and telling him all about it. So in my home district. Thank you.
Okay, any final questions or comments? Thanks. We'll look forward to more updates as the program is launched and moving forward. That concludes our superintendent's report. There is no instructional report this evening, so our next item is number 8, Business Services and Labor Relations Report. Our first item is 2.1, the approval of the 2020-2021 original budget. And May, can you provide some introduction?
Certainly, I'm going to share my screen here and hopefully it'll work. Good evening, school board chair, members, and district administration. It is my pleasure to co-present with Gloria Wilder, our Director of Finance, the District 287 original budget for the 2021 school year for your consideration this evening. And so the budget development process started back in November and is very centered on the strategies from our strategic plan of student outcomes, practices to achieve racial equity and provide excellence in services, and multifaceted communication systems. These strategies have been further developed into the district priorities that you have seen in our incredible infographic. At the center of everything we do, and especially budget, which is the allocation of our resources, are student outcomes, racial equity, evidence-based instruction, trauma-sensitive and healing-centered practices, and employee well-being. An investment in strategic priorities budget process was used this year that included in-depth multiple-year proposals from all of these areas that spoke about the investments that had already happened, the results that had occurred, and the items and what investments would be needed to continue to work on these priorities in the future. The safety and well-being of both our staff and our students continues to be a district top priority. As you have heard from many different reports to the board, these investments are key to providing a trauma-sensitive and healing-centered practices approach for our students and decriminalizing mental health. As you heard and see on in Rachel's report earlier, District 287 created a system without SROs in 2017 to better meet the needs of our students. All of the bullet points on this slide are a continuation of investments that have been made in prior years. Some highlights for the 2020 original budget. While the development of proposals and spreadsheets started in November 2019, the biggest budgeting change for the next year's budget was changing to this tier system, and that actually started in the spring of 2019. As district leaders did a deep dive into systemic racial inequities, an area that raised concern from leaders across the district was special education ratios for staffing allocations for different disabilities and how disability classifications were racially predictable. Through months of work with both the member district special ed directors and member district business managers, a new model called the tier system was developed. Thank you so much to our special ed director, Tina Hook, for all of her work and dedication on this. The new system for staffing allocations is based on student needs and not disabilities. This changed nearly every special education budget code throughout the district. And will also change the tuition billing classifications for the 2021 school year. Another highlight in next year's budget is that you will see that the district is planning to use our strategic priorities assigned fund balance to continue our therapeutic teaching model at NEC. And also to create a member district mobile response team that will offer consultation, training, and support to member districts and staff prior to a student being referred to District 287, and also when member district students are transitioning back to member districts. The last item on here is I wanted to make you aware of as a highlight is that the projections that the member districts provided us include a 7% increase in special education students. So you will see that as we staff to support and staff to meet that need, what the impact of the budget was. So back on February 27th, 2020, the board approved the budget assumptions that this budget is built upon. All of the adopted budget assumptions were included in the development of the original budget. This slide just highlights a few. In addition to the assumptions the board approved back in February, I did want to include in this particular slide an additional assumption that this was built upon that back in February we weren't actually thinking about because we took for granted that the students would be in school. But I want to point out that this whole budget is premised on the in-person classes would resume in the fall. So this slide kind of shows the difference in the overall totals for all funds. So all funds includes food service, debt service, construction, everything, okay? So the total revenues, we're looking at about a 2.2% increase over last year's revised budget, or actually, I guess we're still in that year. Over the current year's revised budget, we get so forward thinking that we forget that June 30th hasn't happened yet. And then the expenditures, we're projecting about a little over a 1% increase over the revised budget for 1920. The unrestricted fund balance is projected to be 7.8%, which falls right in our parameter of at least 6 to 8%. It is a reduction from the 2019 revised budget as we are investing in our strategic priorities. While this graph only goes back to 2015, this line remains flat back to 2012 when I started in the district. As you can see from the changes in the cash line, the green line, we need our fund balance in order to maintain a cash flow for the district because the cash can vary by a great deal. So in these next couple of slides, I'm going to break down a particular components of the general fund. So this is the general fund overall, and then I'll have 2 slides following it that will break down particular components. So this is the general fund, and basically what I try to do for everyone is do a little comparison of what would be the rate of inflation, right? So we're using a 3% rate of inflation, and then how does the budget that we're looking at compare to that rate of inflation? So if you follow all the numbers on here, the budget growth over inflation is a little over $3 million for the general fund. So that increase is 6.53%. If we just take just the general fund, there are 3 main components tying into that, and one of those is the higher ADMs. Remember, we talked about a 7% increase in ADMs for special education. We also talked about we're planning strategic expenditures in our priorities, and then we also when Gloria dives into the details, you'll see we have a COVID-19 assigned fund balance and expenditures. Now, breaking down 2 of the main components of that general fund, this is our admin and operations. So when Gloria gets to her thing, this is the very first line. So you can see that for FY20, our budget was 14,242,000. If I when you put 3% inflation on top of that, it would go to 14,669. And our actual budget that we're presenting this evening is actually below the 3% inflationary increase. And then the next major component of our general fund is our special education fund. And this is the majority of our expenditures are in this fund. So you can see that in the FY20 revised budget, that was 56,423,000. If it went up by the 3% increase, that would be 58,116,000. And our budget is projected at 60,932,000. So that total projected increase is 7.99% or 4.99% after inflation. And that is mainly due to adding additional staff and support to offset that 7% increase in enrollment projections from member districts. Now that I've provided some background information and summarized the budget from a 10,000-foot level, Gloria Wilder, Director of Finance, will provide you with some more detailed information and graphs. Note that there will be time for questions at the end of the presentation.
Good evening. I am going to start at this original budget summary. May just went over two areas in the first category, which is our general fund unassigned fund balance, the district admin and operations, and the special education area. I wanted to also add to the district admin and operations that we are anticipating that the expenditures will exceed revenues in that area. And we are planning a spend down of that beginning projected fund balance of 621,000. In the ALC academic area, we are anticipating using fund balance of 340,000. And in the career tech area, we are anticipating 97,000. So as May said, that brings our projected fund balance to the 7.8 within that board policy of 6.8%. Sure, my cat had to get in the action here. And that is down from what we projected at the revised budget at the 9.1% and from final year FY19, which was 9.21%. Because we are projecting to use fund balance in this area, we will at FY20, the end of this current fiscal year, have to reserve those funds per audit standards. So in the final FY20 statements, you'll notice that there will be an assigned area under the subsequent year budget. So in the next category, the assigned fund, whoops, I was still not done with that slide. Can you go back, me? Sorry. In the assigned area, I wanted to highlight that we are planning some transfers, the 400,000 from special ed to strategic priorities. And we are anticipating the COVID-19 some expenditures and revenue there. We know that no matter what plan of those three scenarios Chad presented earlier, that we will have additional expenses. We don't think that the revenue will, of course, meet all of those expenses. So we are budgeting 100,000 transfer to that COVID-19 additional expenses from the tuition adjustment reserve. And then just going down to the restricted area, I just wanted to highlight medical assistance. we're projecting to use some fund balance there. Medical assistance is another area that's probably vulnerable to this pandemic if we don't resume in-person classes. And then the other, oh, I'm sorry, I went right to the, yeah, okay. And then, sorry, I lost my place here. The basic skills extended time, I just wanted to highlight that area. You'll see there's no new incoming revenue there. And that was because this last legislative session, there was a repeal of that requirement to take part of your compensatory and reserve it for the extended time. So we're not going to be required to do that. We will use up the existing fund balance for that purpose. And then just on the non-major funds, just to highlight the internal service funds for the health. Right now in this budget, we will project that that'll be a positive revenue stream, but it will also be depending on this pandemic and how that affects our staff and our health insurance. So now you can go to the next slide. So on those transfers, we have our food service area. You'll notice on the previous spreadsheet that food service is not in the transfer column. We move that into the revenue for the food service area because that is required area to have a balanced budget. But that does come from the district-wide admin and operations area for that $434,000. That's very similar to the FY 20 current year budget. We had $440,000 in that transfer for that budget estimate. This also, food service, of course, if we don't have in-person classes, is another area that could be vulnerable to the additional COVID-19 loss of revenue. So on the previous slide, I did already talk about that we are assigning that fund balance for COVID-19 this year. And we know we will have some funding sources, but we, in likelihood, will have to use some of that tuition adjustment reserve. And then the $400,000 to strategic priorities that May kind of highlighted in previous slides. So we can go to the next slide here. This budget was developed with the strategic plan in mind and those key investments that May talked about earlier, the safety, school safety, trauma sensitive organization, our safety coaches and mobile response team. Again, the tuition adjustment reserve is an area that we have reserved for several years now, and we have historically used it to offset any potential losses in revenue for MDE tuition or other tuition-based programs. But this year, we just wanted to highlight that that may be also used, or potentially we might have to tap in that for any potential losses that result because of the pandemic if that continues. And then lastly, our debt service fund balance that is planfully growing. We will grow that every year so that we will be able to pay the debt off for the North Education Center when that borrowing comes due. Okay, next slide. Okay, so our revenues in a pie chart here, you can see that our biggest source of revenue is state sources. And of course, the largest part of that is our special education area, but we also do get some state funds through a Northern Star Online supplemental. And then of course, some compensatory funds, as well as some miscellaneous grants. And then just to highlight our other large, second largest pot of revenue comes from our internal invoicing of services. So these are invoices that 287 sends out, and they include invoices for our ALC academic areas, our teaching and learning, our care and treatment, our career tech, and our itinerant services. So we can go to the next slide here. So comparing those revenues to prior year, you can see there is not a lot of shift in the portions of the pie. So the sources of revenue remain stable, and then you have minimal fluctuations in the percentages. Let me go to the next one. So then putting the expenditures into a pie chart, you can see our far biggest area is our special education, combined instructional areas. So if you combine the special ed, ALC academic, career tech, and the district-wide instructional and student support, that makes up 80.4% of our total expenditures. So if we go to the next slide, if we compare that again to previous years, you can see those pieces of the pie have minimal changes from prior year. Little bit of reduction in admin operations and support areas and food service. And then there was that increase into instructional areas of 0.6%, 0.6% to bring it up to that 80.4% for instructional areas. So we can go to the next slide. So the next set of slides will be graphs, just to kind of break down the revenues and expenditures a little bit differently. Important to note on these graphs, they are in thousands. So every time you see a number, you want to add like 3 zeros behind it just to make these graphs to work out. So the first one, we're breaking it down in the revenue down to the different areas. You can see the district-wide admin and operations is relatively flat to prior year budget. The instructional areas of ALC, academic, and career tech, the revenue is fairly flat there. And then the special ed is showing a growth or increase from prior year. The total assigned is showing a slight decrease in revenue with very little funds going into that area. The restricted area is projecting a flat budget compared to FY20, and the non-major area, non-major funds area, you'll notice there is a large drop from FY18. FY18, the red column, is when we received the construction funds for ABEC, and so that's why we had that big spike of 17 million in that particular year. So we can go to the next slide. So again, looking at revenues, if I look at the first column is our total general education, and the increase is 5.5% over prior year. And if I look at total all funds, it's 2.2. But let's see. Oh. Okay, I thought I had another slide in there. I guess not. So then the next slide, I guess we can go to that. We're then doing the same thing, breaking down the expenditures into the different category areas. Admin, operations, and career tech are pretty flat against prior year. Had a slight increase in the ALC and academic area. And again, that special ed is projecting that growth. The restricted areas projecting slight decrease, and there is a slight increase in assigned expenditures, and that's due to those planned expenditures for district or strategic priorities. There is a decrease in the non-major funds, and you can see that is due to the construction is primarily been completed in the prior years. So then we'll have a drop off of those expenditures. Okay, I think we can go to the next slide. So then the expenditures for the total general fund is projecting that 6.5% over prior year. And this graph includes the debt refunding in construction. So then if we go to the next slide, that debt refunding and construction has been taken out. So of course the general fund remains the same, but you'll see the difference for the total funds change a little bit there. And with factoring that out, the changes in total funds are not quite as significant. And so between FY20 budget and FY21, there was about a 2.55% change. So with that, I wanted to thank the board for hanging in here tonight to hear the original budget, and thank the principals and their administrative assistants and other department leaders for their work with the budget and staff planning. And a special thanks to Tina Hauk and Elizabeth Lodge Rogers, who are very instrumental in our budget process. And then also like to thank the finance team, many who work behind the scenes that you are probably not familiar with, but they are instrumental in developing the budget, and wanted to call attention to Phyllis Vitt and Dave Anderson on my team that help with getting the system ready and budget development. So then the last slide is just if you have questions for May or myself.
Thank you, May and Gloria. That's a lot of detailed work, and we certainly appreciate the thoroughness of the information. Are there any questions or comments before we approve the proposed budget? I don't see any raised hands, either on the raise hand function or on the screen. So with that, I'm going to ask if there is a motion to approve the 2020-2021 original budget as presented.
So moved.
Moved by Steve Adams.
Second.
Seconded by
Sam.
That was Sam. Thank you. Seconded by Sam Sant. And Crystal, would you please call the roll?
Adams.
Aye.
Rocky is an aye. Casey. Aye. Keen.
Yes.
Dallas.
Yes.
Douglas. Aye. Coons.
Aye, sorry.
Thanks, Michelle. Marty.
Aye.
Neville.
Yes.
Sant.
Yes.
Seidel.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries. And again, thank you, May and Gloria, and please extend our gratitude to your entire team. Next up is our Human Resources Report. And Michelle Axel, am I correct that you will be presenting this segment?
You are correct. Welcome, Board Chair, Board members again. There was a small explanation ahead of time, so I'm going to move this forward. This is a resolution recommending the placement of a continuing contract staff member on an unrequested leave of absence.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments regarding this proposed resolution? Okay, is there a motion for approval of the resolution placing a continuing contract teacher on unrequested leave of absence?
I so move. This is Andrea.
Moved by Andrea Keene.
Seconded, Heidi Marty.
Seconded by Heidi Marty. And Crystal, would you please call the roll?
Adams.
Aye.
Brackey is an aye. Casey.
Aye.
Keene.
Yes.
Dallas.
Yes.
Douglas.
Aye.
Coons.
Aye.
Marty.
Aye.
Neville.
Aye.
Sam.
Yes.
Seidel.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries. We'll move on to item 9 on the agenda, board business. And we have a second read on policy review. Ann Becker, thank you for your work on policy. Are there any changes since we last reviewed this at our previous board meeting?
The only changes were to respond to suggestions from board members, one of them being to remove the actual names of the people in the positions that were referred to.
Thank you. So are there any questions or comments anyone has before we approve this policy bucket? Okay, is there a motion for approval of the data privacy and records policy bucket as presented?
So moved, Heather Douglas.
Moved by Heather, seconded by Michelle Coons. Crystal, would you please call the roll?
Adams.
Aye.
Brackey is an aye. Casey.
Aye.
Keene.
Yes.
Dallas.
Yes.
Douglas.
Aye.
Kuntz.
Aye.
Marty.
Aye.
Neville.
Yes.
Sam.
Yes.
Seidel.
Yes.
Motion carries. And thank you for your work on policy. Much appreciated. So at this point, we are at our informational items, chair report, tentative summer meeting dates. There's the information on these items included in board book. For AMSD, I'd like to invite Andrea Keene to give an AMSD update in general and maybe specifically about the Reimagine Minnesota conference at which you were one of our presenters. Great to have you there. So Andrea, what can you share?
Sure, that would be my pleasure. Last Wednesday, we had the Reimagine Minnesota conference. There was a great turnout. Almost 300 people attended from across the state. There was a combination of panels, breakout sessions where we did world cafes with school board members. And then there was a keynote by Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan, which was great. And the entire conference will be posted on the AMSD website, with the exception of the breakout sessions within the next couple of weeks. I would also encourage you to take a look on the AMSD website at the pre-work. Paula Forbes, who moderated and planned the event, did some really great videos giving kind of the history of segregation in Minnesota. She talked about how you can't really change things if you don't understand the history. So there's a great video on Board v. Board of Education, and going back even further, looking at segregation in a series of cases that have led us to Cruz Guzman in the present day. So I would recommend taking a look at that. And as you probably know, the special session has ended. They adjourned early Saturday morning. We do have a little bit of education legislation. I will be super brief. House File 33 passed, and there are just a couple, usually most of the items are more policy related. A change in referendum notice dates, dyslexia screening, mental health training for all teachers, vaping awareness and prevention will be required, curriculum. What else? Oh, this might be more relevant for 287. For special education, school districts can conduct a functional behavior assessment, an FBA, as a standalone evaluation, and also limiting school districts' ability to do preschool discipline and expulsion. That's all I've got.
Okay. Questions or additional comments on AMSD? I want to jump back just briefly, and this is in all of our board books, but just a reminder to please consider a tentative date of July 30th in case we do need an additional school board meeting. We're moving into our longest board break of the school year cycle because we'll reconvene in August. So nice to just have a tentative date available in the event that there is any business that we need to consider. Is there any other business that needs to come before the board this evening? And any items that anyone would like to share for once around the table? I see no raised hands, and it is getting late. So we got a lot of work done this evening. Thank you all. Thanks to everyone who presented, and thank you all for being here this evening. Adam, I wasn't sure if you would stay outside the entire time, but you have lights, so you've got it covered.
I do, yeah. I should turn on my brighter lights, but
that's all right. It looks nice. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Michelle.
Second,
Michelle
Adams.
Booth, seconded by Steve Adams. Crystal, would you please call the roll?
Adams.
Aye.
Brackey is an aye. Casey.
Aye.
Keen.
Yes.
Dallas.
Yes.
Douglas.
Aye.
Coons.
Aye.
Marty.
Aye.
Neville.
Yes.
Sam.
Yes.
Seidel.
yes.
Thank you. Motion carries. We are adjourned. Everyone have a great evening and a great few weeks until we see each other again. Hopefully in person, but
Yeah.
if not, video.
Thanks, everyone.
All right.
Thank you.